Hey folks, I'm Matt and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. The UAP issue continues to get national media attention with the release, of course, with Lue Elizondo's book Imminent, along with the UAP Disclosure Act of 2024 that will be considered by the Senate when it comes back from recess on September 9th. And I'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But today we have three guests who are taking UAP UFO research seriously with the scientific rigor it deserves. But first, please hit the subscribe and thumbs up buttons on YouTube. Leave a comment and let us know what you think about this episode. You can also find us on X at Good Trouble Show and everywhere else on the internet at The Good Trouble Show. And you can also find us wherever you enjoy your podcasts. And we're trying to get caught up on our podcast stuff. So just search for The Good Trouble Show with Matt Ford. And of course, as always, we need your help keeping the lights on. You can become a Patreon member of The Good Trouble Show by going to www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show. Sign up and you can support our great work here for pretty much the price of a coffee. Anyway, before we move on here, I want to talk just shortly about the UAP Disclosure Act of 2024. This is kind of an unscripted thing here. I'm just kind of tossing in, but it's really important. So around September 9th, the Senate comes back from recess. And what they're going to do is they're going to vote on the UAP Disclosure Act as part of what's called a manager's package. And the thing with the manager's package is it's an all or nothing thing. And what I mean by that is everybody in the Senate has to unanimously approve for this UAP Disclosure Act to be included in the Senate version of the National Defense Authorization Act. If we have one senator that won't vote for it, that kills the whole thing. So what's really important for everyone watching this show is to call their senators. Say, we want the UAP Disclosure Act to go into the 2024 NDAA or National Defense Authorization Act. We want this. Citizens of the U.S., we are demanding UAP transparency. And that is how everyone at home can play their part. Now, I also want to address backing up a bit. What I would like all of you to do as well is also contact the senators that are sponsoring this bill. Even though they may not be in your state, call their office up in D.C. You'll get a staffer at the other end. And for Senator Schumer, Senator Rounds, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Heinrich, call these folks up and express your gratitude for them doing what they would say they would do last year when Republican Congressman Mike Turner managed to gut this thing for the most part. And so when all of this was gutted, Schumer and Rounds said, you know what? Next year, we're going to bring this back up. Americans deserve the truth on UAP. So it is these folks, and trust me, staffers listen to these messages. They read the emails. Call them up and say, we are grateful. We may not be your direct constituent, but we are grateful that you guys in the Senate said you followed through with exactly what you said you would do, and you reintroduced the UAP Disclosure Act. This version is pretty much a carbon copy of last year. So the idea, it'll be approved by the Senate. It'll go into the Senate version of the NDAA. Then towards the end of the year, during what's called the reconciliation process, the House has their version of the UAP Disclosure Act, hopefully, and they come to an agreement. This thing passes. And in 2025, which is when the 2024 version actually goes into effect, we will have passed the UAP Disclosure Act. But it is important that all of you at home do your part. Pick up the phone, email. If you go to UAP Disclosure Fund, or the UAP Disclosure Fund, UAPDF.org, if I remember right, is a website. They have tools, UAP Caucus. They have caller tools. They have information about all of this. Finally, Part of what killed the UAP Disclosure Act of last year, from how we understand it, is Travis Taylor, Brandon Fugel, both of Skinwalker Ranch, along with former UAP Task Force Director Stratton, went and basically lobbied against it because they were opposing the eminent domain language in this bill. The fear, I think, on their part is that Big Daddy government is going to come in and repossess whatever is buried in Skinwalker Ranch or in other things. And, certainly I don't want the government coming in and taking something out of my house. But the reason for the eminent domain language, this is the reason, folks. Part of the UAP Disclosure Act of 2024, it has this eminent domain language in there that essentially says it forces any government contractor to disclose what material they have of non-human origin or possible non-human origin. And who they will disclose that to is a board, a select board, a blue ribbon panel that will be established in the White House. I think it's like 9 members. So without this eminent domain language, this blue ribbon panel that will sit in the White House, they can go to Lockheed Martin and say, Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman. We know Lockheed Martin has stuff. We know Northrop Grumman has stuff. We know Aerospace Corporation. They have these vehicles in their possession. Without the eminent domain language in the bill, any one of these corporations can tell the panel at the White House, you know what? We don't have to show you what is behind the door. We are not legally obligated as a corporation, as a business in the United States of America. We are not obligated to tell you what we have. Period. The end. The only way that through this legislation that this White House blue ribbon panel can force the defense contractors, the private contractors, to disclose what they have is through eminent domain, this eminent domain language that sits in the bill. So let me reiterate to Jay Stratton, to Brandon Fugel, to Travis Taylor, who, by the way, I'm a huge fan. I watch their show all the time. I love their work. They're doing great work. Brandon Fugel is spending a ton of his own money to get to the bottom of this. But gentlemen, this language is not there for them to come and take whatever is at Skinwalker Ranch. That is not the purpose. That is not going to happen. The purpose is to ensure Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Aerospace Corporation, and others that they can legally be forced to disclose what they are holding in their garage. That is all it is. So I would encourage those of you, Mr. Stratton and Fugel and Travis, to please do not lobby against this legislation. To lobby against this legislation will doom it. And at the end of the day, this is the best thing we have. This is the best thing we have to move the ball forward. So what I would say to the three of you or any other folks here that have business interest in this topic or in reverse engineering of metamaterial, what I would say to you is that is the only reason that this language, this eminent domain language is there. It is not there to come repossess anything. That is not the purpose. But to lobby against this legislation over one single element out of 63 pages of legislation, guys, that's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. None of us want that. And I know all of us, Brandon, Jay, and Travis, we all want disclosure. I certainly want it. I absolutely respect your business interests. I'm a capitalist. I'm all for making money. But to go and derail the whole legislation over that one element, guys, I'm telling you, it's it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We all need this. If this legislation gets defeated, it's not the end of the road, obviously. There are other things that are going to happen. There is a plan B and plan C, and things are going to happen. But let's all buckle up. Let's all do the right thing. This is not about one company or one television show or one, my YouTube show or whatever. This is all about disclosure, not only for the United States, but for everyone in the world that deserves to know the truth. Period. The end. Hands down. So let's get this thing done. Let's encourage our senators to pass this by unanimous vote for the manager's package for the Senate version of the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act. Then when this goes to the House and we have big old nasty chair of the House Permanent Select Committee of Intelligence, Mike Turner, if he goes to try and derail this thing, well, he's going to hear from a lot of us. And folks, it's time, as Lue Elizondo has said time and time again in his recent interviews on CNN and elsewhere, as he's talking about his book, Imminent, everyone can handle the truth. America can handle the truth. The people of the world can handle the truth, period, the end. But this is not going to happen if everyone at home sits on their butts and doesn't do anything. Everyone, it is your duty, and I'm speaking to my fellow Americans, it is your duty as an American to get this thing passed. It is your duty to country to finally rectify this issue of having essentially a Pentagon and the Pentagon and the intelligence community and the military industrial complex. They work for us. It's not the other way around. We do not work for Lockheed Martin. We do not work for Northrop Grumman. We do not work for the Pentagon. We do not work for the CIA. All of those folks, they work for us. And the only way that ship is going to be turned around is for Congress to reestablish its constitutional duty, its constitutionally mandated duty of having congressional oversight over the executive branch. Full stop. This has to end. This is, as Lue Elizondo has said in his recent interviews, this is an existential threat to the Constitution of the United States. It is a existential threat to our democracy. And until this is rectified, and this legislation, my friends, is the best way to get there, it's going to be more of the same. So, folks, do your thing, do your duty, pick up the phone, call your senators, call your lawmakers, call your congressmen, call your congresswomen, and tell them that the UAP Disclosure Act of 2024 must pass because you love your country, you love our democracy, and you know that there is some really shady shit happening, and it's got to come to an end. Full stop. All right. Enough of that. Okay, our next guests are trailblazers in the UAP field with their recently published paper in Scientific Research Publishing. Please welcome researchers on our left here, Gerry Tedesco on the very top left, John at the top right, and Donna Lee Nardo. Let's see, how are you guys doing?
Pretty good. Happy to be here, man.
Yeah, excellent. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. And I have to say, one of the things you always hear is, where is the science? Where is the proof? You have these debunker folks that are always kind of complaining about not having like good evidence. And here you guys are. You're not part of a big university or anything like that. You're taking it upon yourselves to have a really legitimate scientific study of this thing. And so Gerald, my question to you, I understand that but all three of you really kind of put this together, but how did this whole thing come about?
Well, early on, it was during the pandemic. John and I, it was like 2020. wanted to build an RV that we can establish equipment in there to do. We wanted to do surveys on electrosmog, Wi-Fi signals, microwave signals that might be harmful. This was there. We wanted to establish safety levels or safety protocols for that.
Yeah, this was basically a survey type investigation, looking at EMI emissions from various different sources, and we had basically put together an instrument pack to study, the amount of emissions that were being generated into the atmosphere, into the environment. Here on Long Island, there has been cancer clusters, cancer studies, and of course, the link to EMI, electromagnetic emissions. We wanted to produce a paper on that. We wanted to follow that up and actually, put this in a mobile platform and go from one end of the island to the other and do this survey, collect the data, present it in a way that, if there was a cluster that, we could possibly make a link to whether or not it was an EMI or an electrosmog issue.
Basically, it was establishing exposure levels. The other thing is we were interested in weather phenomena like ball lightning or dark lightning, some of the more exotic weather phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
But in June of 25th of 2021, with the release of the ODNI report, Avi Loeb had gotten involved with the Galileo project. We felt that the equipment we had on our RV might be useful, so we had contacted Dr. Avi Loeb. We talked about our system. He found an interest in it. So did some of his principal scientists. So he actually asked us to join the Galileo project as research affiliates, independently. Of course, they had their own, they want to go in their own path, and we had our mobile, the mobile unit path. They wanted to establish a fixed platform on over in Harvard.
Yeah. Now, and this is a way to differentiate the two also, is that they did have a fixed platform as opposed to what we had established, which is a mobile platform on a recreational vehicle.
Yeah.
And we're gonna dig into that a little bit later, as far as like what the technology is and all of that behind it. Now your team, the three of you, were recently published in scientific publishing, and here's the abstract of this. And what it says here: a 10-month field research study was meticulously conducted at Robert Moses State Park, RMSP, on the South Shore of Long Island, New York. The objective was to determine if aerial phenomenon of an unknown nature exist over a coastal location and to characterize their properties and behaviors. Primary and secondary field observation methods were utilized in this data-centric study. Forensic engineering principles and methodologies guided this study. The challenges set forward were object detection, observation, and characterization, where multispectral electro-optical devices and radar were employed due to limited visual acuity and intermittent presentation of the phenomena. The primary means of detection utilized a 3-centimeter X-band radar operating in two scan geometries, the X and Y axis. Multispectral electro-optical devices were utilized as a secondary means of detection and identification. Data was emphasized using high-frequency and low-frequency detectors and spectrum analyzers incorporating electromagnetic, ultrasonic, magnetic, and radio frequency transducers to record spectral data in these domains. Data collection concentrated on characterizing VIS, NIR, SWIR, LWIR, UVA, UVB, UVC, and the higher energy spectral range of ionization, radiation, alpha, beta, gamma, and X-ray recorded by Geiger-Muller counters, as well as special purpose semiconductors. You guys aren't messing around there, and girls, you're not messing around at all. So
lots of tongue twisters.
There are lots of tongue twisters, and we'll get into a little bit more of the technical side of it. But Jerry and John, going left to right, I understand that you guys actually worked in the defense industry on these sorts of things. Is that right?
Well, Gerry did.
I did. I spent many years working in the defense industry. And primarily my work involved what's called RISDA systems, which are reconnaissance, surveillance, and target acquisition systems. sensor systems. I worked there for quite a few years. I also had worked at Underwriters Laboratories for 2 years. John is more of an instrumentation expert. So John was actually the true expert on the instruments. And he spent most of his life working in Underwriters Laboratories as a project engineer and a research R&D specialist.
So,
Right. So, yeah, so my direction was a little bit different from Gerald's, less on the military side, but more of an instrumentation development and practices. A lot of it was had to do with laboratory procedures and so forth, and basically testing a product for safety measures. And
what educationally, like what is your background that put you in the defense industry and Underwriters Laboratory?
Okay, I have actually a mixed background. I've 2 bachelor's degrees, one in public health. I actually started out in healthcare field, and I actually went into forensic science for a couple of years. I worked in a forensic science division of the medical examiner's office in Suffolk County, New York. I had gotten into electronics. I studied engineering, specifically mechanical, quality engineering, and architectural. And most of my life was spent in the defense industry. That's where my specialty was.
Yeah. So on my side, it's, I pretty much stayed within the electronics industry. It's, I started out, as a technician. I worked for, Circuit City, and I was a service technician. I used to repair the video products, audio products, white goods, brown goods, as they named it at that time. But later on, I had followed up in the laboratory in the Underwriters Lab for safety testing, and I had gotten a bachelor's degree in electronics engineering, and then followed it up with a master's degree in education, in teaching technical education and technical studies with regard to electronics. But most of the work that I did was basically developing new protocols and new equipment for safety testing.
And Donna, tell us a little bit about your background and sort of your sort of function within this group.
Well, my function in this group is primarily as a researcher on the ground during the field study during the 10-month period. Plus, it's doing a lot of the background work on various events and the circumstances that were taking place at the sites, Robert Moses State Park and the 2 other alternate sites that we studied. So my background primarily is in investigation, open source, as well as corporate and other. And I've also been a journalist and researcher all my life. I've worked in technology. I've worked in finance, all using the same skills, communications and investigative research. And that's my background. And that's what I led to this project. John and Gerry and I have known each other for many years, and primarily because we all shared an interest in exotic phenomena, science, anything that's science, anything to do with the stars, the solar system, celestial bodies, UAPs. And this was just a natural thing for me to, it started where I was invited out on when they first started in, it was July of 2022. When they went out on their first field outing, I was not able to go, but I went out on the next one. And what I saw with the electro-optical optics that I had, that I was using, that I had never seen before. I know what an IR camera is, but this was much, much more serious than that. And what I saw in the sky, and then when I would take the lens away and see nothing, I was hooked. And that's why I was so happy to join the team as a researcher and a background investigator. And so that's the role that I fulfilled and still fulfill. And my background pretty much dovetails with that in my interest level. John, Gerry, and I, one thing I'll say is the 3 of us have always been lovers of Star Trek, lovers of science, as I said, and also one of our favorite pioneers is Jacques Cousteau. So we like that aspect of, doing something or approaching something that's groundbreaking, where not too many of the footprints have been left. And this is definitely the UAP issue, surely falls within that realm.
Oh, I would.
A wonderful experience.
Awesome. Yeah, I would definitely say so. So I'm curious. I want to talk about this mobile laboratory, and it's called the Nightcrawler. And here's let's see, I've got a little photo of it here. Yeah, I love that.
Yes.
It sounds like the sequel to Knight Rider. It's maybe like David Hasselhoff could be driving that thing around. So Donna, tell us a bit about this vehicle. Well, maybe just kind of like the top level. I know Gerry and John will get into some more of the technical aspects of it, but how is it used? What is the philosophy?
Well, the philosophy is a mobile platform that could get around easily. A lot of these sites on Long Island, especially near the water where we primarily studied, you need a mobile vehicle. And although there were many instruments that we had with us that we'd take in our arms down to the coastline, right down to the breaking waves or on the beach sand itself, the first Nightcrawler, just like the second Nightcrawler, because there have been two iterations that John and Gerry designed. The first one was phenomenal. I wish I had a picture of that too. There's nothing wrong with the second Nightcrawler and the one that John and Gerry have active now, but it's just a telemetry platform of sensors and instrumentation, and of course the radar, which was something that was very important that John was able to secure for the study, because that is pretty much a component that is lacking in a lot of other UAP studies.
And here's I put up a photo here of the interior of it. I mean, that's quite impressive.
There are various sensors and instruments, acoustics, electro-optical, electromagnetic, and John and Gerry can speak to the specific technical aspects of each of those devices. But there's a lot of handheld devices that perform some similar work that we would take with us. But the two Nightcrawlers were designed primarily to be able to go in and out of these sites at all hours of the night, because a lot of these field studies were 12 hours, 8 hours, 6 hours. It was done. We were on site during cold winter weather that were blowing against the Nightcrawler, in hot weather, where one night I remember early on, we had a lot of our instruments outside. And we soon learned that was not really a great idea, because some of the equipment was expensive and there was so much moisture. It was very, very humid that one night. So John and Gerry will say that they wanted, again, a mobile platform where you could be safe from the elements. And of course, the instrumentations and sensors could be safe from the elements. Not knowing what we would encounter, John and Gerry built both Nightcrawlers as Roland Faraday cages. So, and John could speak to the technical expertise of that as well. But I know that both are just very potent looking. The first Nightcrawler and even this Nightcrawler, you'd feel safe in it. You'd feel safe to travel anywhere. I think you'd have to wonder who would want to come up against such a Nightcrawler, whether it's an animal, an alien, or what have you. But
Sean Kirkpatrick, he could show up.
John took steel mesh and he embedded that in the walls, floors, ceilings of both Nightcrawlers as an added protection, because, with this phenomena, with any celestial or planetary phenomena, we don't know where it's coming from. Maybe it's under the water. Maybe it's non-human intelligence that's always been here. Not knowing, I think John and Gerry's approach was right on, because a lot of this type of activity, especially when it comes to UAPs, is reported over many, many decades now, of bringing with it, I'm forgetting the actual word. The Faraday cage actually prevents harm to humans as well as the devices. So what is that word, John and Gerry? I'm forgetting.
Yeah, the EMI. Electromagnetic
but even beyond that, what makes people get nauseous and when they're exposed to, what is that word? They were exposed to
EMI.
Electromagnetism, biosensitivity to it.
Got it.
Another word that it's more common that the public, people in the public will radiation.
So John and Gerry, does this thing almost operate like a skiff? Like, could people eavesdrop on what's going on or jam it, or would the Faraday cage stop any sort of interference?
It would make it difficult, because once it's all closed up, you're not even the cell phone's working there.
Yeah.
So you can't get a signal. There's a wire mesh within the walls and the door and that sort of thing. It's basically there to isolate any kind of external EMI from getting in the instrumentation, contaminating the data. We wanted to make sure that data was secure, that it wasn't something like, because, out there's a 5G cell phone tower. They're transmitting at a significant power, so we did want, to be measuring or have that basically providing interference to the equipment that is operating within the RV itself. So we secured that with course with the Faraday cage. But the whole RV is basically instrumented to analyze from a stable mobile location. That, like Donna says, we did incorporated, of course, radar. We have multispectral cameras. We have, UV cameras. We have, SWIR. We have thermal, long wave. We're also looking at the acoustics too. We have a acoustic system with a parabolic dish, which is very directional. They're all tied to spectrum analyzers. And there's that's special with this particular type of instrument, because they have what they call a significant dynamic range. What we want to do is we want to look at the maximum amplitudes as well as the minimum amplitudes of these signals, which could ride within the noise floor. So we want to be able to pull these signals out of the noise floor if they're very weak signals, and we want to be able to display everything at one time. So that's the advantage of using the spectrum analyzers. We have intercepted some interesting signals in both the acoustic range and the RF. Using the parametric set of antennas and so forth that we have. And of course, this is something we're following up with, where we're doing further studies on it. There is some statistical significance to it as far as what we're measuring. Other things we really need to confirm, because it's the events are kind of random. It's not like working within a laboratory environment under controlled conditions. So it's difficult out there.
Yeah, the environment. I mean, the environment's contaminated with a lot of RF emissions, Wi-Fi signals. So we have to discern which is the normal background noise and which is a real signal.
Right. And you got communications from the airports too. It's not just the cell phone towers that are around, the numerous cell phone towers. You have communications from the commercial traffic back to the towers and so on. And we're surrounded by three different airports. So we got to be careful as far as what we're screening for. And these signals, you're using spectrum analyzers to analyze these signals. We can look at that very, very minute, sensitive detail.
And the other thing is we have comparison reports and comparison data sets that we can look at what's normal background, what they're transmitting at. So that's that. So the first thing to do, we'll look at that. And once we eliminate that, then of course we have these outliers those are our anomalies. And
Donna, how long did this whole thing? I have to be honest, I am completely blown away that the three of you have done this. It's not like you're working for some big company or university. The fact that the three of you have done this, my hat is off to you. And that is dedication and dedication to this topic. How long did this van take to put together the second iteration?
The second iteration was probably, John constantly was re-engineering it. And every time we would go out for a field study, Gerry and him would talk, we'd review the data and review the events of that field study, whether it was that night or the next day or that weekend. And they would always find a way to add to it, to change something, to add equipment, or just to change existing equipment. At one point, so I would say probably 8 months to a year when John pretty much stopped tinkering, but he kept tinkering to improve it. For example, he made like a bubble window on the top of the Nightcrawler 2, where he installed a camera, and the Nightcrawler already has cameras all around
an observatory.
He
Wow.
made like a mini observatory. It was just wonderful. It looked almost like a gun turret would look, but
Exactly.
and it was just wonderful to see that type of engineering. And both John and Gerry were toying with it. So I'm going to say 8 months to a year. But they're still toying with it and still improving it. But it was a lengthy journey. And, John and Gerry mentioned prior, Matthew, that they started in 2020, albeit for a different purpose, but these guys and me, we would go for lunch, we'd go for breakfast, we'd go over the years, and UAPs always came up. It was always the topic that would come up. So I know that although they were planning electrosmog, because I visited them when the first iteration was still, when they were still working on it, I gave them some solar panels. I thought maybe that could help do something. And that was in like October of 2020. But John actually took money out of his 401k, I'm sorry, to support this effort, to buy the first Nightcrawler and then to buy the second. And Gerry and I contributed however we could. But John worked on that for a long time. And then, as he said, when the ODNI report, he was guided by that. They were looking at their local airport in that first Nightcrawler using not the radar that, of course, it's installed now with the FCC license, but they had other radar that they were using. And they were finding some anomalies that I remember them showing me charts and printouts, and I was very intrigued. And then, of course, the following year is when Avi Loeb, as it's already been said, he announced the start of the Galileo project. And so it just made sense that John and Gerry would dovetail more for that, because as John already pointed out, it was already in process, this first vehicle. And so very quickly, John and Gerry realized, and we did quite a few field studies with that first vehicle. And it was very, very interesting. It was built like a gigantic army tank is all I could say. You wouldn't want to mess with it. Cars on the road, people would stare at it at the beach. People would come up to it. They couldn't make out what the heck this big, gigantic vehicle was. It was, how tall was it? Like 11 feet, 12 feet?
It was like 13 feet, 13 feet.
Wow.
It was just enormous, and it just looked like impenetrable. You felt safe in it. But it wasn't soon after the first, like maybe 5 or 6 field studies, that John and Gerry wanted something better. They wanted something even more mobile, something that they could take on a throughway, take on, most roadways. So they had to downsize the height of the vehicle. And it just made sense that the vehicle that John found, would serve the purpose. And so they decked that out and outfitted it the same way as the first one and improved on it. And as I said, they continue to improve on it. And it's wonderful to be in that Nightcrawler too, because again, it has signage on the side, and people can't figure out what it is. John has roll bars on the front, roll bars on the back. We were going to do a gig up in Massachusetts during the dead of winter one year. We were going to do some sleuthing up there. And so John made it even more, impenetrable, safe, because we didn't know if we would be running into wild animals or what have you.
Sean Kirkpatrick really, trying to get in.
It's the genius of the telemetry platform that I think gets, the public is awed when they see the outside of it, but most of the public doesn't get to see the inside of it. And that is a whole different story. I mean, I'm a techie. I love gadgets. I'm a first adopter usually of any new technology, always have been. I think John and Gerry are the same. We're kind of like nerds in that way. But the way that engineering, they put their two heads together, John and Gerry, and decked it out, and even advised the Galileo project's own engineers to do similar, especially with the cameras, the instrumentation of the cameras. And of course, this is the only project that I'm aware of, and John, you could correct me, where active radar is being used, active marine radar is being used for such a project. And it's unique in just so many ways.
Well, I want to bring up, I've got some photos here of some of the equipment, and maybe John and Gerry, you can speak to what we're looking at here. So these are StarViz low light planetary cameras, and what are SWIR cameras? What are we looking at here?
All right. So SWIR stands for, the acronym stands for shortwave infrared. Now shortwave infrared is, it's an extension of the infrared, wavelength. There are a lot of night vision cameras out there that will, they'll go basically to the end of the visible light spectrum, and they'll increase that wavelength up to about, roughly about 900 to 1,000 nanometers. The SWIR camera will take that even further, and some of them even have a visible light range. So it'll go from the low end of the visible light in the blue, which is 400 nanometers, and continue that on up to almost 2,500 nanometers. The camera that we're using here it caps off at about 1,900 nanometers. So that's a significant wavelength increase into the hyperspectral band to look at anything that might be in the infrared that is deeper in that infrared wavelength. On the other side, the Starvis cameras are more planetary cameras. They're using a unique Sony sensor. They're Starvis family of sensors. They're called IMX 462s or 464. 462 is a smaller imager, but these sensors they'll take you up to between 350, which is the part of the UV band, believe it or not, and it'll take you through the visible light on up to the infrared at around 1,200 nanometers. So they cover quite a range. They're extremely light sensitive. They don't need image intensifiers in order to see at night. And even the newer models that we had just purchased are even so much more light sensitive, especially with the IR. And even in completely dark environments with minimal lighting, I would say, something down that's less than a millilux worth of lighting.
Wow.
These cameras will give you a decent visual of what's going on around you, even in the color mode. The newest sensors provide a color night vision visual.
Now, what about, so what do we have here? So we have LiDAR-based rangefinders. Why do you need those? What function do those serve?
Yeah, so with the LiDAR, with these rangefinders, what we're looking to do with these objects that we're encountering, that we're seeing out there, we have to get distance measurements. LiDAR seemed to be the best way to do that, and anything that was we're observing these objects that are roughly about anywhere between maybe 500 meters to on out to maybe at 3,000 meters out on the water. We wanted rangefinders that can extend that range, and using several of them, we could do some triangulation to get a position on it and be able to determine what the size of the object is by knowing that distance, using the field of view and, of course, the distance from the object itself. So calculations were made, and we were able to determine that the objects that we were looking at were anywhere between 2 and 4 meters in diameter.
Got it.
And one other thing I'd like to add is another nice idea about using these LiDAR systems is when you're able to bounce a laser off an object, it gives you some idea of what the properties of an object might be. In this case, the object must have some kind of mass in order for us to get a signal back. Right, and the laser itself is infrared. So it's not something it's not bright visible light. It's not going to blind anybody. It's, generally they're about 850 to 920 nanometers. So they're in the infrared. That's not visible at all. And, we can, like I said, we can get the distance measurements on these objects without it being an influence on any other traffic or people that might be around on the beach and that sort of thing.
So here we have a thermal imaging camera. How is this used?
Okay, so this is a long wave imaging camera, thermal imaging camera. This is in the long wave. We're looking at the thermal effects, a thermal return. The lens itself on long wave thermal cameras, imaging cameras, are made out of metal. So they block visible light altogether, and you don't get the issues with reflective light. You don't get the if you're looking at something that is maybe being reflected by other sources of light like the sun, that sort of thing. This actually blocks that. Will block that visible component. It'll only pick up the temperatures through the metal lens to the microbolometer, which is a specialized sensor for that. The camera itself is, and that's something else. When we were looking for thermal cameras, we just didn't want a camera that had digital zoom. We wanted an optical zoom camera. This camera starts in optical zoom, works into digital. But we wanted optical zoom and a very secure and clear lens system in order to visualize that. So of course expense comes in and plays a role there in order to get those kind of cameras. The resolution is it's around the VGA, most computer VGA type resolutions. It's 640 by 480. It can be extended to 512, 640 by 512. But it's enough resolution, especially with the optical zoom, to be able to see aircraft even at 30,000 feet. We can definitely see the silhouettes. We can see the of the fuselage. We can see the engines themselves, the heat from the engines. So clearly identify an aircraft even at great distances.
I should mention that, and it just has an optical zoom of 30 times. The other thing which unique about these cameras, they're FLIR systems, forward-looking infrared, and something that I worked on as a military contractor, is if you look at the lens itself on a thermal camera or a FLIR camera, it'll look like a mirror. And it's deliberately made that way. You have a metallized substrate that's over the lens itself, which is a thermal conductive lens. And what the substrate is, the reflective substrate is therefore is to reflect visible light back. So this way you're just getting thermal energy to enter the camera.
And you're not getting glare.
Yeah, you won't get glare with these. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Now, Donna, I understand your team, you chose 3 locations: Robert Moses State Park on the southern coast of Fire Island National Seashore, Cedar Beach on Long Island's North Shore. Well, I guess there are 2 of them. Why did the 3 of you choose those locations? Was there known activity there? And then also I'm curious too, because some of the footage that we'll look at in a little bit here, you were out in like the middle of the night. Did you have to get a permit? How did all of that come together?
Yes. Well, John and Gerry put their heads together. They already had an indication from the get-go that Robert Moses State Park, because of its remote nature, because of so that means darkness, not a lot of people. They knew where the 3 airports nearby were, how they were situated. So they knew the air traffic flow. There was a lot of reasons to choose Robert Moses State Park as the primary field study location, because that was the primary field study location. They had conversations with Ryan Graves and people like Ryan with expertise over, observances in the past that the Navy, saw about, 10 miles or so off the coast, West Coast, as well as the East Coast. There have been a few high level, the Nimitz, there are a few high level incidents. And so they thought that would be the perfect location. And it proved to be the perfect location for all the reasons that I just discussed. And also because it's a barrier island and it's the southernmost part of Long Island, Barrier Island. So looking straight out, as I think John mentioned earlier, you'd be looking towards, I guess that would be Jacksonville, Florida, in that direction straight out. Because Robert Moses State Park is kind of like mid Long Island, from New York City all the way out to Montauk Point. Cedar Park and some other alternative locations that we sampled were sampled primarily to see if these other locales had similar activity that we were citing on somewhat of a regular basis. We couldn't predict it, but in retrospect, there was some type of a regular activity level that we were picking up on John and Gerry's sensors and on the instrumentation at Robert Moses State Park. So we use those other sites just to do our due diligence to make sure that the other areas of the waterways. Cedar Park is on the north shore of Long Island, so it overlooks a body of water that goes over towards Connecticut. And it was just a way of, triangulating Long Island to see what activity is in the skies. And the interesting thing is, John has said quite a few times, he's long thought, and I think that it's valid. And I think that the outcome of this study so far totally aligns with it. But John has often said that people on Long Island, maybe even other, coastal states like Long Island, New York, often see things in the sky, whether it's with an IR camera or just their naked eyes. And so John's theory is maybe because a locale like Long Island, New York, or these other locales out in California, Catalina Island, people are not seeing things in the middle of the state or the middle of, like, say, this island or Catalina Island. What they're seeing is, because they're so close to the waterways, the site that people are standing on, when they have these observances with the naked eye, that what they're maybe seeing is activity over the water. So choosing these water-based sites was essential to John and Gerry from the get-go for all of those reasons. And it definitely dovetails with the expertise of people like Brian Graves, who, that's where the activity has taken place, over the water. And another interesting thing, and it didn't really factor into John and Gerry's planning or anything that I did as a field participant, but there's a huge underwater canyon called Hudson Canyon. It juts out from New York City and goes and really starts opening up, 5-10 miles away from the Robert Moses State Park site, which was the genesis of this study primarily. And there's always been this talk that, whatever people are seeing, whatever the military people or the Air Force pilots have seen, are they seeing something that is coming from outer space, in space? Is it underground? Is it in the mantle? Is it in the water? And so the water has been something that has really captured people's imagination. Perhaps there's life here, alternate form. It's been here, predates humanity. Who knows? The questions just get more, they just multiply when you go towards that route. But the water is a key element. And Long Island, we're surrounded by water. So there were other alternate sites that John and Gerry and I sampled besides those three primary ones. For example, John lives close to an airport. He was able, with Gerry, to really pin down the visuals of an airliner. And so that helped aid the study as well. And there was some data that was used in comparison that were generated from, for example, John's home, which is located near another airport. And as far as the New York State Park permit, which we had to obtain. You can get a permit to be in the New York State parks, any of them in New York State, which Robert Moses is one. It's on Fire Island. It's on a federal land, but it's governed and controlled by and maintained by New York State. So we did have to seek a New York State permit, and we did for scientific purpose. That's one of the reasons you can get such a permit. You could also get a stargazer permit if you want to just watch the stars with your telescope. We saw a lot of people doing that, and they were always curious as to what we were up to. It was very interesting. Or you could get a fishing permit to, come in your scuba gear. And so we saw a little bit of that as well. And that permit had to be, initially it was, I believe, just for maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And we kept on renewing it. And the people at the park were very interested in what we were doing, especially the police on patrol sometimes, or the park personnel who would come around, and they're always checking in to see, what have we observed? What's the status? And they were very curious and interested. And then the other thing, and again, I kind of harped on it before, but John developed contacts with the Coast Guard and also with the FCC, and he was able to obtain, something that's pretty phenomenal, and that's the X-band, right, John, the radar?
Yes, X-band radar. Yep.
He worked to get that FCC license, and that just made all the difference. In addition to the Nightcrawler, both of them, and all of the wonderful, gorgeous, helpful instruments. And of course, John and Gerry's knowledge as engineers to create this, and then get to know the instruments so well to be able to tweak them, build on them. But getting that radar was really, that's something that differentiates, I think, this civilian study, right? Because it's a civilian study. And Matthew, you kind of harped on that before too. This is just primarily John and Gerry, and then I came aboard with them, and we're just 3 regular people, and we just have this love for searching and for trying to be a pioneer, because we have that love to search and discover.
I love that. Yeah, that is just fantastic. The the amount of time clearly all three of you have put into this, and certainly the financial resources as well. I tell you, my hat is off to you. So so yesterday, the three of you provided us with quite a few videos. I understand you have cataloged something like over 50 UAP encounters at these different spots, and of course you've taped most of these. So what I'd like to do is start going through some of these things. Feel free to step in and narrate and tell us what we're looking at. There's kind of no particular order. So how does that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, great. So here's the first one, and let's see. I have some notes here. I'm gonna look at. So this thing is it's some kind of cube. So let's have a look. So tell us what we're looking at here.
Okay, so what you're looking at here, Matthew, is it's a magnified view of an object that was over the water. What was interesting is that the approximate the distance that we were looking at, it looked like it was about 500 meters away. But using the LiDAR, we got an interesting reflection back, and it happened multiple times. Every time I was able to hit the object with the LiDAR beam, and the way to visualize that is by using a night vision scope attached to it. So
that's the beam coming from the right there. That's that's the LiDAR.
So
okay.
Working that, you'll actually see there's some reflection of the object too within the beam.
Wow.
But every time that beam had hit that object, I was getting a distance measurement that didn't quite make a lot of sense. It would come back at 44, 45 feet away. This happened multiple times, and we tried this with several different LiDAR systems, and we're getting pretty much the same result. Why that is, we can't really say.
Our assumption is there may be some kind of signature management. It might be maybe a jamming the LiDAR beam itself, or stopping it short of hitting the target by maybe some field around it.
But it looks as if it's relatively stationary, or is it bouncing around?
It's stationary, but it's also doing a wobble. It's actually wobbling. And if you notice, you'll see it looks like it's rotating. It's rotating. Right. And you'll see these multiple flat plates on it. That appears to be multiple flat plates that are lit. To us, in shape, it looks like it's some kind of polyhedron, multi-sided flat surface to three-dimensional object.
Yeah, and this has been pretty consistent throughout the study. Mm-hmm. When these objects are not in a luminous state, you're observing it with night vision, you can definitely see some kind of polyhedral shape to it that is rotating, and it could be rotating in a random direction. Other times we'll see it where it's rotating, where there's a it looks like at least one side is either reflective or luminous, and that one side is always facing us. But you can see this rotation. It's more of a rectangular type shape. That if you look at it closely, you'll see it goes from vertical to horizontal. It's pretty well defined as if you looked at it like
if you look like a disco ball.
Yes.
If you rotate the disco ball, where you get the reflections of light and the multiple reflections off the mirrors. Ball, it's off the flat face mirrors on the disco ball.
What kind of colors? What kind of colors was it emitting?
So this is night vision. This is using the image intensifier in there, so you can't see the color. But we've seen other objects
more in the visible, or near IR to visible.
Near IR to visible, but using the starburst sensors that are extremely light sensitive, we can see that there's a kaleidoscope of color being generated from this almost prismatic. From this, to
your naked eye, could you see it?
Yeah, there are times that can be seen with the naked eye, but the most of the time it has to be done with light sensitive cameras, either in the visible light or in the infrared.
Donna, go on ahead. Sorry.
We have noticed visibility when the objects would increase their luminosity, and at times they would brightly they would raise that luminosity to a really high level where you could see it visibly.
And they can be extremely bright.
Yeah.
Donna, you were going to mention something?
One thing I'd like to add is sometimes we would see objects multiple in somewhat of a formation, and it almost seemed like one would decrease its luminosity and the next one would get a bit brighter, then decrease it. And it's like they did a tag team act. We saw that a few times.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
And I also want to say that there are times that when we're using the LiDAR beam or even a torch flashlight, an invisible light, if we paint the object with a beam of light, we've seen sudden movements of these objects at an incredible velocity,
trying to evade
the beam itself.
Yeah.
Well, and clearly this is not a seagull or an aircraft, because you can't see it with your naked eye.
Right. Yeah. And if just a fraction of a second before, you did see a bird that had passed the field of view,
and that's something we had looked at, and we had looked at every object in that environment, in that area, from aircraft. We have identified the lighting systems, the configurations of them. Seagulls are most often seen there. Seagulls have a large wingspan. The wingspan is larger than the body mass itself, and when those wings are flapping, you get an oscillation, which you'll easily see in the.
And the other thing is you'll hear it in the acoustic sensor.
Yeah, we have the acoustic.
We have the parabolic dish aimed at it. You'll definitely hear the wing, the motion of the wings, the air motion under the wings and so forth. We also use if it's a ship of some sort, and we have seen that before, where you'd have on the superstructures of the ship, you'd have these navigation lights that you could see. We can pick that up with radar, and that's easily detectable with the X-band radar that we have, either the X scan or the Y scan, the vertical scan. So we'll detect that. We'll see that. The other thing we'll use is thermal cameras with the optical zoom. So we'll look at it and see if there's a heat signature. If it's a ship, you'll see the fuselage. You'll see the heating coming off the lighting systems on it. You'll see the cold water around it. And we'll use different palettes, different patterns to identify that, either black hot or white hot. Sometimes we'll use the rainbow patterns to differentiate between these changes in temperature from the boat itself, from the hull of the boat to the water. That you can easily see.
Yeah, and
what we normally do also, rudimentary basis, as the night would begin. We would get there, around 7, 8, 9 o'clock, whatever it was. We would see the lay of the land first. And so John would, of course, queue up the radar, but we used ADS-B. Many times nothing was found on ADS-B. We used apps. We used the Marine app to know what vessels were frequenting the area in front of any of the sites we were in, primarily Robert Moses State Park. So we kind of had an idea, inkling early in the night, what the activity level was. And of course, the flight patterns were known, but we were there. We'd be there. We would get some activity before 12, but a lot of activity after 12. And there's not a whole heck of a lot of major airliner activity going to any of the New York City airports during those early morning hours.
Now, I noticed in some of the footage, and we're going to continue to show most of it, depending on time. But I noticed most of them did not seem to be on a tripod. What was the reason for that?
Okay, so this is something we addressed with some of the scientists who critique that. This is not a controlled laboratory. We're not in a building where where everything, all conditions are controlled. We're in an environment that can be inhospitable at times, and you're on the coast, so that you have very strong winds and wind gusts, and we have used the tripods. The problem is that many times when you get a wind gust, the tripods go over, and then we damage expensive equipment, and we've had to replace equipment. We have replaced some of those tripods with very heavy-duty tripods, but there's no guarantee. So, and the other thing is we want mobility.
Right.
And we do have a shoulder harness, too, to carry these cameras.
Right, and you're on the beach sand, too, so it's hard to anchor that tripod down. You still get vibration from the wind, and the vibration can be worse than actually holding the camera and trying to maintain maintain that stability, and we've had that too. There were times that, we were out there with 35, 40 mile an hour wind gusts. So it's really difficult to keep that thing stable. Even on a tripod,
Sure.
So sometimes, and if the LiDAR systems are attached to the cameras, these objects have a tendency to move very suddenly, vertically or horizontally. We have to move that camera pretty quickly, and locking down the tripod, so you can have a tendency to miss that. They're one-offs sometimes. These are one-off events, and it's very difficult. We can't. There's times we just can't duplicate it over and over and over again because of stable conditions.
The other things we do have fixed systems on the Nightcrawler itself. We have fixed cameras that we do use, and of course they don't move.
Understood. Okay, let's watch the next clip that we have here.
Okay, so this was an object that was seen roughly about 1:30, quarter to 2 in the morning. What we noticed was the object itself. It was difficult to see in the visible spectrum, but we had the night vision. We had the Starvis sensors. We used a planetary camera on this, and we were able to see the kaleidoscopic color. But we noticed that the object showed rotation, and there was another object just above it that seemed to be coming down through the clouds. And the two objects, when we looked at it frame by frame, it almost looked like the two objects had merged together and synchronized their rotation.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm gonna stop it here because it looks like on the top right is just like at its 2 o'clock. Is that another object, or is it shining a light on the cloud?
Yeah, we believe it's another. No, we had looked at that, and we looked at even with our cameras, we could see the beams of light of an aircraft in the nose. There's no beams of light, and this light was as intense as the object itself.
Right, and the other thing if you look at the object that's rotating with a luminous side to it, you would see that fluctuation of light on the cloud.
Yeah, you would see that movement of light. The other thing,
wow.
If you look, it also looks like a polyhedron. That thing's rotating, and like I said, that light would be fluctuating if it was a light being emitted from an aircraft.
Right. So these two objects, like I said, we analyzed it frame by frame.
Yeah.
And these objects almost look like they're cohesed together. And the rotation of the one object had slowed down. It looked like they synchronized together.
Amazing. And again, I want to point out as well that much of what we are showing you, this footage is the very first time this has been shown publicly, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Amazing. Because we have tons of stuff here. That is something else. So let's watch this next one.
The shadow behind you might be. It might be like
okay, so this one is very interesting. This was an object that was visibly seen. It was in the visible spectrum. We had first noticed it on the cameras inside the Nightcrawler itself. So John and I approached the seashore with our night vision cameras.
And this was at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, this was between 3 and 4 in the morning. This was out there for a long time, and you'll see other objects out there. Now they're all in different. They're all similar objects, but all in different spectral ranges. So our opinion is that this might be some kind of signature management. They're varying their spectral frequencies. The one on the water remained visible, but when we zoomed in, we also have a 60 times zoom on that object. And what it's doing is it's a spherical object that's rotating rapidly, and it's casting a light of reflection on the water. It's some distance above the water, but close to the water. And if you look, it's changing its intensity.
And how that one appears to be like on the water there. That looks like it's not very far away from you.
No,
from the shore.
It's not that far at all. If you look when the luminosity decreases, you'll see that polyhedral shape to it.
Yeah, we basically we estimated it to be roughly about between 4 and 8 feet from the surface of the water.
Yeah.
And in terms of the diameter, any idea of how big it is?
Again, through the triangulation with two cameras, we determined that the object was anywhere between 2 and 4 meters in diameter.
Wow! So this thing was big.
Yeah, it was relatively big.
Yeah,
Wow.
and it was out there. That was that's about 480 meters.
And
And
this
it's-
was around 2 a.m, you said?
This was between
Probably 2:30 to 4 in the morning. It was out there for a long time.
closer to 4.
Yeah.
Closer to 4.
But it was out there for at least an hour or so.
Right.
And of course, these other objects, these you couldn't see
Well, no, it
visibly.
disappeared.
These other spheres,
You could not.
they were completely in the IR.
Wow.
It's flashing. It's
This
right
is just,
above the
this is
water.
absolutely amazing. And so now the one that was on the water, could you see that with your naked eye as well, or only
Yes.
infrared?
The one on the water we could see with a naked eye. That was the only one that was visible.
It might be like
Okay.
a-
And do you think did the three of you think that these things were conscious? You were viewing them at all?
Well, the interesting things that appeared right where the RV was parked. It's actually lined up at the nose of the nightcrawler. So they suddenly appeared over the water in that area, and then others would appear. We saw at least 5.
Right.
4. It started with like 3 objects, then we saw 4, then 5.
And this particular object that was on the water, it was straight down. If you looked at the line of sight, is straight down a cut leading to the beach.
Yep.
And that's where the RV was parked, the laboratory. So it almost as though it aligned itself right in front of us so we can see it visually.
And another thing I want to add is we also were scanning these things with radar. We have intimate radar contacts that formed a wedge, and these things were in a wedge shape, rising above the object on the water. So we do have those radar contacts, and and these things were rapidly moving around, almost like fireflies. They were actually creating echo trails, which are the radar picks up as the motion of these objects. But it formed a wedge in front of the vehicle.
And there is no prosaic explanation. These aren't
nothing we know.
seagulls or anything like that.
No, not
Or-
And that was in the dead of winter. So
Wow.
Yeah.
it's not a mosquito mass or a bug mass or anything
No.
like that.
And again, this is the first time any of this has been shown to the public. And
yes.
and you stated that you had in this 10-month period, you'd recorded or cataloged over 50 of these types of things, correct?
Yes.
Yes, and over
Wow.
that year period, it actually went over a year. It's eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, just unbelievable. Okay, let's see. That's number 4. Here's number 4.
Okay. This is that same object.
Okay, this is a 60 times zoom on this object. We're trying to look for surface detail, and if you'll see, it's bouncing around. But if you see, it's casting a light on the water. It's casting its own reflection on the water. So it's low to the water.
And there's no way this is a boat.
No, not at all.
No.
We actually used a thermal camera. Again, we used a long-range thermal camera with 30 times zoom. We were looking for the thermal silhouette of a boat. There was none there. There was actually no thermal silhouette of any structure. It was just this light.
And
Like
this,
Cheryl said, this is looking at it at 60 times magnification.
We would have seen the boat.
well, and just the fact that you can clearly see it, the light bouncing off of the water. Now, was this aiming something at the water, or was this just picking up the luminescence?
That's something we're trying to determine. It was doing something over the water, and it was wobbling. It was changing its elevation. That's why you see the reflection here, and then it disappears and it goes down again. It's doing something. We're not sure what that is.
Right, and you also see that starburst pattern above it. It appears to be rotating very quickly,
Very rapidly.
Wow. And if I were out there, we're also looking at the stars, how would this compare to the stars in the sky intensity-wise?
Intensity-wise, this was brighter than much brighter than the stars in the sky.
Yeah, I mean, if you were looking at even a Venus on a super clear night, this was much brighter.
This was really bright.
Wow. Okay.
Very high luminosity.
All right. Let's look at the 5th one here. This is impressive.
Okay.
This one.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, this was on this object. It was we suddenly watched it moving laterally along the shoreline, and it was moving from the right field of view to left field of view, from east to west. I mean, from west to east.
Low.
And if you look, it's a sphere of light. It appears to be blue and changing some colors. It was followed by an orange or reddish object on the water that intermittently appeared, and that followed it for across the field of view, and then this object just disappeared.
Oh, I see.
Right, and then we don't know whether that secondary object was actually submersing under the water.
And it looks kind of purple.
Yes, and if you look at it closely, you'll see it's a kaleidoscope of color. It's not just blue.
It's pretty low.
And you see it's rotating. It looks polyhedral. The other thing, it's very low to the water. And it's also made no sound. Absolutely, it's completely quiet.
Yeah, it was about between 40 and 80 feet from the water.
The other thing is we have acoustic.
Surface.
The other thing is we have acoustic listening devices. So John said with parabolic antennas, there's no sound. We picked up no sound.
Yeah, I mean we can certainly hear the waves breaking. The crest of the water breaking onto the shore. We can hear.
Yeah.
I mean, we can hear seagulls out there, but no sound, no apparent sound from this object.
Now, as you're panning around, you're seeing these other flashes of light up in the sky down below. What are those?
Yeah, and you'll see in the distance, we pan over, there was a couple of fishermen that were out there.
Yeah.
And those were the only people out there because at this time, the public is restricted past 7. We have a research permit, so we're the only ones basically out there, except for the occasional fishermen.
Yeah, this is just insane. Wow. So the one that just flashed off to the right, was that a fisherman or is that another unknown?
No, that's that orange object or that yellowish orange. If you see, that's rotating too. That's following this object. It's trailing it, but it's on the water.
Right. And now when you pan over, that's a fisherman. That's
when you pan all the way to the right.
That's their flashlights.
That's west. They're west of it.
Yeah, that's their flashlights.
Yeah, that's their flashlights in the fishing.
Oh, I see. Okay, now I can make them out. Yeah. Wow. This is just. And would you estimate this to be around the same diameter as the other objects?
Same diameter.
We estimate the same size
based on its distance from us.
Okay.
That's too low to be a plane. Of course, there's no navigation lights. There's nothing recognizable as a plane.
Okay.
And I'll say something else too. You see that's this blue haze around this object. We have brought out UVC binary detectors. Now these UVC detectors, they're produced by a company that designs them for fire detection at great distances from airplanes. They can detect a campfire from 28,000 feet, using these UVC detectors. So if there's something in the UV band, that's a very specific wavelength, and these detectors are designed to detect wavelengths from 160 to 200 nanometers. That's a very narrow, specific bandwidth for the UVC. And we have had those detectors trip when we're seeing these objects, their luminous levels in the wavelength of this ultraviolet.
And that tells us that this might be some kind of plasma. Plasma sheath or plasma field around this object.
All right, let's watch the next one we have here.
I'm bouncing off it.
This, wow.
Okay, so this was an incident we had in August. We had a triangular formation of orb-like objects. At first, we thought it was one fixed object, but we weren't sure that it was more likely three separate objects. Then there was another object below it that suddenly appeared.
Here it comes.
And I believe Donna was looking through another camera and saw it drop from the sky.
Yes.
And then, of course, it moved from right to left. Right, Donna?
That's right. And wasn't this the night of like 20 plus mile an hour winds? It was very, very windy.
35.
Windy.
Yeah. And also, if you look at that clip, we're using a visible torch. The visible torch is they're somewhere around 500,000 lumens. So we're lighting this thing up, and you can see the reflective activity off of these objects. You can see them actually reflect light, and that is the only time we saw this object. Was the rest of the time it was invisible to the naked eye, only in night vision. And if I hit it with the torch, every one of us could see it reflecting the light.
Mm-hmm.
That was the most stunning to me. That totally no naked eye could pick it up, and that it did seem to react to the way John would torch it, would flood it with light.
You know what I'd like to do is I want to restart this clip, but I want to listen to just the video commentary with just to hear what you guys were experiencing. So I'm going to turn this up and going to restart it.
I'm bouncing off it.
Yes, come closer. Now I see 3. Oh, yes, come visit us. Come to the beach and visit us.
This is my card is full. Done.
Talk with us.
I get my cameras done.
Here it comes. Here it comes.
All right, so you guys keep filming.
Is that the flashlight?
Yeah.
What happened?
See if you get a close up. I mean, we'll get a surface features.
John, did you use the flashlight?
Yeah, it's right. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. It's right here.
All
We're
right,
not
stay
gonna run
still.
away this time, right?
Stay still when I'm running.
I don't see it anymore.
It's on the surface of the water.
But I don't see it coming approaching.
Now we're talking
Here it
about
comes,
the
it's
lower
coming.
object
I can't
that's
tell me
moving
it's
to the
not.
left.
I can't see it.
Now, without the flashlight, again, it can only be seen with the night vision cameras.
And I don't know if you noticed that when the camera
Now
panned
it's
to the
now
right,
it's
you
to the
saw- we
left
actually
of
saw
the
a ship.
object, and it's
So you
making
can
its
see a
way to
comparison
shore.
with that with a ship.
It's getting brighter.
The ship was most
I keep
visible.
filming.
And the ship was on radar. We had a
All right, I'm
radar
gonna-
target on the ships there.
But this
All right, there it
was
is.
on the radar.
And
All
the
right, I'm
ship was
zooming
the ship was 9 miles away.
And clearly you can see that the three objects are higher than the water line, than the horizon.
Yes. Yep.
Yes, they're hiding in the waterline, and these things were in a fixed position in 35-mile-per-hour winds, made no sound, and they were there for 45 minutes in a stationary fixed position.
Very stable.
4 of us saw it that night.
There it is. There it is. All right, I'm gonna light
They
it up. I'm
weren't,
gonna
they
light
weren't
it up.
stars either.
All right, make sure you're getting a nice video.
They actually
I'm
just after
lighting it
45
up.
minutes, they actually dissipated. They disappeared, and then we saw a bright flash of light, and they were all gone.
Come closer, do you see it? It's
See it?
moving again. And how come I see it only in the light?
I got it, Gerald.
All right, let's get
You
it.
can only see the light, as Donna said.
Yeah.
Me.
And this one is on the surface.
I see
No,
it.
now
Yeah,
it's not
this was
flashing.
just-
It's
This one
it's
looked like it was riding
yeah.
the surface and sometimes dipping under the surface of the water.
All right, just keep filming.
Amazing. This is just some of the most compelling stuff I've ever seen.
Thank you.
And we're going to show more here in a second. But when the three of you are out there and you're viewing this, what are you thinking? Like, what is going through your head?
So lucky to be out there and trying to capture and seek this wonderful, intriguing data.
And you can hear the excitement in our voices. We're shocked.
Yeah. I mean, especially at 4, but there's 4 sets of eyeballs on this thing, and not one of us could see it visibly.
And
It was only in the night.
and that time when that video was taken was about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's watch another one here. Oop, let's see here. Start this. Oh, there we go.
They're right over the water.
Is this the same
This
one?
is the same object.
Yes, and what we're
It
doing
looks
is
like a triangle.
you could see the water, you could see the waves cresting, and you could see it just over the
They're
water.
there.
And you notice
Clear as
these
can
were
be.
really bright in the
Let me zoom
IR
in
spectrum,
6 times.
and they're forming like a scalene triangle kind of formation.
Right. And what we also did, we used IR cut filters. So if we put the IR cut filter in front of the camera lens,
Again,
it would completely block out that light.
The other thing is when we do a video analysis and we actually enlarge the image and watch it in a slower frame rate, we can actually see rotation of each individual spherical object.
And if you look closely, there's a haze around it, a round haze of light,
Right.
each one of those objects. And it seems to diffuse the light around it,
Mhm.
we tried to get optimal focusing on some of the 4K cameras. We couldn't do that.
Yeah, we couldn't get edge detail. It was interesting.
Even under a flashlight, even under visible light, torchlight, we could not get that into focus.
Matthew, can I ask you, when you first saw this snippet of this video, did you wonder, wow, are those 3 different objects, or is that one object with 3 light points?
That is a really good question. What is your theory?
there it is.
Or all 3 of you?
I'm open to it, but it seems like there's more evidence that they may all be separate objects in a
Yeah,
composition.
That's what we believe.
That's our feeling.
Okay. All right. Here, let's watch. Looks like this is a continuation of that.
Now you're talking about the one
Yes.
in the water?
Yes,
It's
and the
it's
reason why
just
we
above
did
the
that
water.
is if you look at the bottom of the screen, there's a date and time. The object was out there for 45 minutes, and by panning the camera
Yes,
away
that's
from
the
the
cue.
object and moving it back, you'll see that the
Where?
object just disappeared. It was gone.
Joel, it's sitting on the water. It's sitting on the water. It's sitting on the water. It's coming this way.
And that's the lower object we're talking about.
Here it
the,
is.
the one that
It's
seemed to
coming this
just
way.
pop up.
It's getting closer. It's right in front of us. It's right in front of us. Yeah, it's on the water. It's sitting on the water. You know what it is? The Sue's light is maybe drawing it in.
Yeah, Sue had an infrared light that she was hitting it with.
And maybe that, because at times it wobbled closer to us, and we could see it move closer to us, then back away.
It's under the water. Oh, there it is. It's in front. It's right in front of it. It's on the water.
You see, it's right under that triangle.
It's on the water. Let me see if I hit it with a... There it is. You see it, guys?
Yeah, now it was visible at this point.
There it is.
It reflected the light. So it's some kind of mass had a reflective surface.
And this flashlight has a range of about 1,200 feet.
Okay. So it's clearly this object is within that distance.
Yes.
Here it comes.
Wow.
It's just above the water.
Now, I understand before we dig into this, and again, I really appreciate the three of you sharing this publicly for the first time on the Good Trouble Show. I understand that when the three of you have been out doing this research at these parks, that you have experienced harassment from unknown vehicles. Would you care to talk about that?
Yeah, that was kind of interesting. At times, again, they would show up at maybe 1, 2 in the morning. We'd see a small group of vehicles, black vehicles, tinted windows, and it would be shining. They would have their high beams on, so they could see us and we couldn't see them. And there shouldn't be anybody out there because you actually need a research permit or a stargazing permit at that time. And we didn't know why they were there. They waited there for a little while, and then some people got out of the vehicles, walked around, and went back in, and they left.
Could you see? Did you look at them through your night vision goggles or anything to see if they were in uniform?
It was hard with the headlights on. The night vision, if it's blinded by the headlights.
Why we assume that's why they had to hide the headlights.
Yeah, so you couldn't see with the night vision. But once they had turned off one vehicle after another, we could see that they were all the same color, a dark color. And they look like they could be either law enforcement or military of some sort. There's some kind of governmental,
or maybe some, I don't know.
Were these
SUVs?
Were they sedans? What kind of vehicles?
They were SUVs, yes.
Wow. And do you think that they could have just been out there to see what was going on, or did you sense that this was intentional?
I think they were interested in what we were looking at. The police department there knew we were out there, and the Coast Guard knew we were out there. So
yeah, and they wouldn't do something like that.
So maybe they informed somebody, or maybe somebody got note of it, and some agency, and maybe was curious about what we were doing out there.
Yeah, the police department generally, or the Parks department would just pull up, and they know who we are by now. They would never just sit there with their headlights on.
It was just it was a little strange.
Keep us under some kind of surveillance.
During this interim, I was making the outreach to all the public agencies and officials that could have a bearing on what we were seeing over the ocean there. And so word was out, Homeland Security knew that, we were seeing something that we were asking them, do you know about this? And, it could have been any federal or state or local agency, but it was unusual. And because I'm so suspect of everything because of the nature of my investigative background, I would, as soon as we pull up to the site, I would always notice, that van's been here like the last 3 times, in the same position.
Yes.
So, you would get to know what to see there. And these vehicles wouldn't normally be there after like 11 or 12. That one white van was, though. It used to be there in the beginning. Until the sun up in the morning. When we be leaving, we don't have just left. So we kind of like all three of us, we were very aware of what vehicles to expect. We got familiar with the fishermen, which there weren't too many really, and the stargazers once in a while. And no one would be out there at 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning, especially in like, minus 20 degrees. We were out there during the vortex one time, the winter vortex, or really hot weather. Like no one would be out there. It was very remote. And that made the work more interesting. And at some point, pretty scary.
Yeah, of course.
Spooky.
And I want to say that Donna's an eagle eye with that stuff, too.
Donna sees everything.
Yes, I know. I'm very detail oriented. I notice things, patterns. We all do. But.
Sure. Okay, let's watch another one here. Okay, so this looks like a tic-tac or something. What am I looking at here?
Yes, Matt. This is an early morning observation, about 7 a.m. in the morning during sunrise. We were using a Nikon P1000 camera with 125 times zoom. The camera was actually set for 100 times. And what we saw was a cylindrical looking object moving from the right field of view across the path of the airliner. Both objects looked like they were at the same focal point. We're assuming, of course, at the same distance or relatively close. The object was reflecting some of the sunlight. Looked like it possibly could be white with a sheen on it, but it had a wobble to it, and it was very unusual.
And what airport is this, like LaGuardia or JFK?
This would be JFK, looking in that flight corridor.
Okay.
The object itself, there was actually, we went frame by frame. There was one frame of video that looked like a club shape object with two lights on it. But just for a brief moment of time, we saw no other navigation lights on this object as it was moving.
Wow.
It was just a single frame.
Now,
so we weren't quite sure what to make of it.
Yeah, this is pretty insane. I want to show you, I took that video and I added an emboss effect, and I want you to take a look at this. I think this is pretty compelling.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. You can definitely see the outline, the detail in there.
And the thing that you definitely can see is that it is 3D. And
yes.
I mean, obviously it's a 3D, but I mean, you can see the dimensionality of it. The top part is in shadow, and the bottom part is in highlight. But I mean, that looks like a tic-tac. I don't see any wings or anything.
Yeah. So then we believe that's what it might be.
I mean, that is really something else.
It seems to have a bit of a wobble to it as well.
It does. No, absolutely. That looks exactly like a tic-tac.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, it was reflecting some of the early morning sun. But the object appeared to be completely white to me.
And you didn't see any wings, appendages, exhaust, anything.
No wings at all. And no flight surfaces. The object, like I said, there was no navigation lights that we generally see, even at this distance, you can see it. There was, like I said, one frame where there was two lights, upper and lower, toward the direction of travel. And, it was club shaped.
And around what time of day was this?
This was roughly about 7 a.m.
Okay. Oh, so this wasn't in the evening. So this was as the sun was coming up.
Yep.
And I would say this is definitely a tic-tac. That's how it appears to me.
Yes, and that's what we believe as well. There have been several sightings, in the glide paths of these planes that people have actually recorded on camera, the passengers of some of the rival flights.
Could you tell if this craft was closer to the camera, or was the jet closer to the camera? What's closest to your lens?
I believe, like I said, we were actually adjusting the focal range on the camera, and they appeared to be in focus at the same point. Assuming at this point that the distances were approximately the same.
I see. Wow, this is something else. Okay, I want to show a totally different one here. Now, this is from our friend Dr. Keith Taylor in New York. He was out there visiting, and explain what we're looking at here.
Yes, so Dr. Keith Taylor had his own camera. He had a Cynex Pro color night vision. And this is something we've noticed last few times we were out there, is that there seems to be an infrared flash. Nothing invisible. We can't see this with our naked eye, only through the night vision cameras. Very, very defined, like it was certainly within the ellipse that you have there. And it's the flash seems to be over piece of land on the southwestern side of the beach. This is over over a dune and facing the ocean. We couldn't determine where the source of light was coming from, but we saw several flashes, and there were one or two occasions where they had actually overloaded our camera that was set up on the night vision RV on the lab. That's a fixed camera system.
Wow.
With a night vision system, and it seemed to overload the iris.
Now, what I want to point out here, I'm just going to freeze it just so people know, because it is very subtle. So what I did is I took your video and then I raised the exposure up a bit just so it would be a little bit more apparent. But if everyone at home, if you look on the inside of the oval and the kind of purple light, now the purple light, that is why is that purple?
That's we believe on the I believe that's from the infrared, the sensitivity of the color camera, the night vision camera. This is a specific type of image intensifier that's using, so it might have enhanced it into the IR range.
Understood. So what I want everyone to do, so look at just kind of the consistency of the purple, and then sort of within this purple, you'll see that just that one area of the frame kind of go white a little bit and then go back down. So it's purple and then there.
And that's, the flash activity.
That's the flash. So I'm going to back it up a little bit. This clip has been looping, by the way, right there. That was it.
Yep.
So, and
that's very directional.
Yeah. And that's the thing that's interesting. Like if you were to say, oh, it's an aircraft overhead with its strobe going off, it would illuminate the entire area outside of the yellow circle. But as you can see, it is just, I'll try to like back it up just to that. See if I can get that one there. Oh, sorry. It's hard to stop it because it's only like a couple of frames. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, you can see like it is right. Definitely.
And we did observe, just up to the zenith, looking straight up in the sky to see if we can identify any kind of aircraft that might have been up there that could have illuminated it. But most of the aircraft lighting, I mean, it's all visible light anyway. That's something we should be able to see.
Right.
If there was an aircraft with a flash pattern, there, first of all, there was no aircraft, and this didn't appear at all in the visible light. This was in the infrared. There was nothing we could see with our eyeballs. I've
looped the clip a little bit shorter. Actually, I'm going to mark out right there. Okay, so here it's going to loop just within that area. So there's the flash. Sure. There's the flash. I mean, it is definitely contained just inside that oval. And the other thing I would point out too is it's not, to me, it doesn't look like the camera is changing its iris setting at all. Like it's not like auto exposing, because if you look to the left and to the right of the oval during this framing, you don't see the exposure change. Like if it were the whole area, and let's say that camera had an auto exposure function, you would see everything, probably the exposure dip overall for the whole picture, but it's not changing at all. It's just in that area.
Yes, there's no change of intensity at all. So the iris is pretty stable at this point.
And did you sense any, and you didn't see a vehicle or anything above you, right?
There was nothing above us. There was nothing in the parking field that we noticed. There was, and this is something that we've seen before. This is not isolated to just this event. We've seen it with activity, over the water. We've seen it with activity at an area called Democrat Point, which is just west on a peninsula of Rob Moses State Park.
Okay, let's look at this next one. So this appears to be security camera footage. And so before I start the tape, what exactly am I looking at here?
Okay, Matt. So this is the security system on the Nightcrawler, on the RV. What you're looking at is a quad view, 4-camera view of the various different quadrants around the RV. The upper left is the driver's side. The upper right is the passenger side. The lower left is the rear of the RV, and the lower right is the front. These cameras are, they're all infrared, based cameras. They're all, very sensitive to the infrared. They're using starburst sensors. So they can see up to about 1100 nanometers into the infrared. The one thing that I do want to point out, is to pay particular attention to the streetlights.
Okay.
On the upper right, you'll see the streetlight over. There's 3 vehicles there. You can clearly see that on the telephone pole. On the lower right is a streetlight that's just piercing through a tree, the upper branches of a tree. Below it is a car parked under the tree. You can see that it's well lit.
Mm-hmm.
The lower left is the rear of the RV, and there is a street light just above the roof. During this incident, this particular case, we had all 3 street lights shut down.
Okay, and we're going to look at this here.
We'll demonstrate that.
And let me ask: Are these cameras motion controlled?
They are motion controlled cameras. They're also heat sensitive.
So something. It's not like these cameras were recording continuously. So something just prior to this clip had turned them all on.
Had triggered them on. Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to play this, and then when we see something happen, I'm going to pause it so you can explain what we're looking at.
Sure.
So it's playing. Wow.
Okay, you can pause it there. Okay, so now what you see here, just as you'll see the street lights, all 3 street lights went out sequentially, within a fraction of a second. There is the one on the lower right that is on a completely different transformer, a completely different line. What we were investigating, whether or not there was some kind of a transient that was running on the power line that could have caused these lights to shut down, which would be a rare event anyway. But the fact that they're on 2 different systems, 2 different transformer systems, was very unusual. You also see that the lights in the houses never went off, so the power was never lost.
Wow.
It just affected the street lights, and in order to do that, above the street light itself on the housing, there is a sensor, a photo interrupter, a photo sensor that senses sunlight in the morning in order to shut these lights off during daybreak.
And I see what you're saying. You can see them all kind of go off at slightly, just like a fraction of a second different as it's going off.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to keep playing here.
Sure. Okay, you're going to see the lower right. You can see there's a blue light in there. That blue light is actually IR. And you'll see there's a roll bar behind the RV, and you'll see that light source gradually increase in intensity from blue light to white light, almost as though an object was descending from a certain altitude. And we believe that that light source is probably the same source of light that had to shut down those streetlights. And the intensity was bright enough to shut those streetlights down.
Well, the thing that's interesting too is that you don't see it out of the other camera. So clearly, this light source was very, very focused.
Yes, they were very directional. We believe some kind of a spot beam of some sort.
And the thing I don't
see the interference.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
One thing I was going to point out here, like right below that top roll bar, right there. If you look right, see at the middle of the picture, you see a garden hedge of bushes, and right above that, you see a fence line, and then right between the fence and the bottom of that threaded pipe, you see white there, which looks like it's the neighbor's windows. So we're seeing light coming from the windows. And what I want to point out is the exposure of the camera isn't changing because you'll notice that the intensity of the light coming out of those windows isn't changing. Like the camera iris isn't changing. That is staying consistent. So clearly there is something above this that is putting this kind of building light intensity. So I'm going to let this play through some more.
Right. Okay. And then, as you say, those were in fact windows, and there were lights inside the home, so that power was never lost. The power was never lost at that point. But you do see an interference pattern that starts out. You'll see some streaks going from top to bottom, and that generally occurs as a result of the operating frequency of the display. The scan rate on these cameras are about 32,000 cycles, 32,000 hertz. So this frequency is in multiples of that scan frequency. I would estimate that it probably was started out at about 10 times the scan frequency and increased from there. That's where we see those lines gradually get closer and closer together. I mean, it's interference pattern.
And what about what about this kind of like pulsing that I'm seeing, where in the scan lines?
It looks like some kind of variation in that light source.
Wow. And the other thing I would point out, I'm going to pause it here, is whatever this light source is probably behind the camera, maybe centered above the truck, because on the rectangular piece of iron that's at the bottom of the photo, the facing that faces the camera, closest to the camera, that's illuminated. So it's not like this object is above the street. It looks like it's right behind the camera lens because it's the near side of the threaded pipe and the bar that you are seeing illuminated.
Right, Matt. We believe it was center left, the source of the light.
Ah, yes.
On the RV.
That makes sense, because you're seeing it also illuminate the left part of that bar.
Right.
So I'm going to let this continue to play.
Sure. Okay. And then you'll see the street lights come back on. Now, something else I want to point out, on the upper left, you'll see a house there. And just above the house, you see a telephone pole, transformer, and you'll see a street light just under that transformer. That light was not affected, and that's at a distance, quite a distance from these other poles, these other street lights.
Okay.
So this was fairly isolated.
And it's continuing to play.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you see the street lights that could return. They triggered back on.
Okay, I'm going to back this up.
They're sodium vapor lights. They do take a bit of time to stabilize and come up to full brilliance. Now you'll see the light on the street light reflecting off the street on the lower left. So this is coming up to full brilliance at this point, and you still see the light source on the roll bar of the RV. So the object was still there.
Wow. This is compelling. That is for sure.
And then eventually the camera system shut down.
Okay, so nothing else happens kind of after this point.
No, that's it. That's
wow.
What we were able to record. Okay, it's interesting to see that the street lights were in close proximity to each other. These three individual street lights on these poles that were literally within about 100 feet of the RV.
I'm going to just play this back again. I think the most compelling part is that you see this build. So,
exactly.
And there is no way that is it's a helicopter or anything, because anything that high up of a helicopter, a night sun or anything, lights up a huge area. Certainly
right.
Way in excess of this. So if it were a police helicopter or something, in the other views, you would see the surrounding area be illuminated. And as well,
Exactly.
we are only seeing the infrared spectrum and just in that area. So with a helicopter, with a police helicopter, night sun or anything, those obviously are the light is of the visible spectrum. So you would see that for sure in the other cameras. But the fact that you're only seeing infrared and you're seeing it build as if a craft or whatever is moving closer to the roof of the truck, I mean, that is something else. I've never seen anything like it. And then as you said as well, these interference patterns, you had never seen this before, correct? And have you seen it since?
No interference pattern. These cameras are on a conditioned line. There's a 12-volt source for them on the battery side of the RV, and they're heavily filtered. So it's not something that's coming in from the line side. This would be radiated emissions, not conducted. And the other thing is that these cameras have there's a microphone source on the RV. The microphone is also triggered by sound, and there was no recorded audio track on this as well. So there was nothing that was being heard or being sensed by the RV.
Well, this is just amazing. All right, let's move on to the next one.
Okay, so this one is interesting. This one, joined for it. There's a spherical object that appeared, something appeared over what it was hovering, and it's on time to hit it with the light on. And I want to say that there was no clouds at that time. There were no low-level clouds. It was a clear sky, clear night. And there's a light now lighting up. The sun's lighting up on something. It disappears. Now that this other light becomes a sphere. It's a sphere. There's a light that becomes a sphere. And there's a sphere something popping to the left. And then there's something over there. Oh my God. Another one just been materialized. Yeah, it just suddenly appeared down the sphere. Now these things in there stay the same level, same little racing hovering above the water field. Then you see a third object appear up to the left. Yeah, that one. Yep. Now this is interesting. We do have wind of it with most of the rail line right there was coming in at one time around this time period, and it's in the same vicinity. The pilot claimed that he saw two orange spherical objects hovering above the ocean surface in our area. One disappearing, and then 15 minutes later, the other disappearing, hovering in place. So this looks similar to that. Yeah, and these objects would stay in that position for what we recorded for as long as 15 minutes.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Just so apparently, I was just looking at the chat here. Apparently, some of the audio is coming through much hotter than it is in terms of these clips. So I've muted some of these down. Okay, yeah. So I think, just saw that. Okay, cool. So, wow, yeah, this is really something else. Okay, let's look at the next one, and I'll make sure to mute the audio.
All right, John, you can. You can address this.
Okay, this is a falling object.
And of course,
if you look to the left, to the upper left of the screen, it just passed you.
Yeah, it happens quickly. It's a spherical falling object, and we've seen maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 of these.
Yes, and the thing is, this is not something we saw right away. This is after multiple views, and we didn't have our attention focused in the right area of the sky there.
Okay, yeah,
and
that's important to say that the data reviews over the weeks and months. Sometimes we would discover something that we missed looking at maybe the second week of the study and review. And John and Gerry, we would go back and in a session, and someone would spot something that our eyes weren't trained on because there was just so much going on in some of the frames. And we'd meticulously go back frame by frame. And it was exhaustive work. And it was just so wonderful to see that there were many things that were caught that none of us saw as we were looking through any of the optics that we had. But we a lot of times we would pick something up in retrospect, reviewing a video for like the 30th time, weeks, months later.
Understood.
And the other objects you're seeing a boat on the water. Of course, you see two other objects, which were aircraft. They were what you're seeing is the landing lights facing directly to us. So you see they look like spheres. But when they turn, you see they change the aspect ratio. You can see the light diminish, and of course the navigation lights. So those we dismissed.
Right. And I'll say something. These falling objects. This is not the only video. We've had multiple videos of these objects falling at the same rate or very similar rates straight down to the water surface.
Mm-hmm.
I see. Okay. Yeah, we should have that audio issue sorted out. Apologies. We had way more videos than what we normally do, and adding the videos, there's kind of an audio setting that I missed. Again, this is part of being a sort of cable access TV in UFO land. So, all right, let's see here. Let's watch another one. Which one? Let's see here. We did. Okay, so we did this one. Yep, did that one. We did this one.
I think there's one that hovers over the grass or over the beach.
Okay, this one we saw. This is, we just looked at this.
The falling object, yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then here is, now what are we looking at here?
Okay, so this is an object that was, at Robert Moses State Park, there's a peninsula that stretches out, and they call it Democrat Point. So this is an object that was over that peninsula, and it was just over the beach area, past a fence line. And you'll see directly in front of the object, there's a barrel. That reflection is a barrel. Those are barrels lined up. And this object was literally just behind that barrel at about 25 feet. Which puts it at about 440 meters from the RV, the lab. And I noticed this object. It was on infrared only through the night vision.
And there's actually two of them, and there's one to the left.
Yes, one just materialized to the left. These objects were rotating. You could see a rectangular, what looks like some kind of a polyhedron, a rectangular source of light rotating randomly. And the objects had moved. This one moves toward the right field of view. The one to the left moves toward the right field of view, but they suddenly disappear.
And the other things we had critics to talk about it possibly if it's pixelated images. They're not pixelated. These objects are made of hundreds of pixels. We have
we've actually looked at the number of pixels, and in this particular in the diameter of the object, is the circumference of the object it encompasses about 144 pixels.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next one. Let's see here. Got that one.
And those objects would suddenly appear and pop out of the ground. Okay, this is very interesting.
And this also Democrat.
This is a star object that suddenly appeared. It's a starburst. So you see, it's casting a reflection on the beach and on the grass.
You'll see cones in the front. Again, it's the same area as the last object, but it's just past the fence line. It's hard to see, but there's a barrel in front of it, and it was casting this light on the beach, on a grassy beach area.
Okay.
And it was rotating. That was a rotating starburst, spherical shape, and it, like I said, it was casting a lot of light on the ground. It was very low to the ground.
Okay.
And this one I could see in the visible spectrum.
Yeah, this was visible.
All right, here's next one.
All right, this was taken by a police officer.
Like I said, a police officer had noticed our vehicle, knows what we do, and handed off this video. One of their partner or friend had taken.
Yeah, this was at 5 in the morning?
4 in the morning.
4 in the morning.
Yeah, this was 4 in the morning. As a stationary object rotating, he said it looked like a Christmas ornament with a kaleidoscope of light. That's what he described. And it was so mesmerizing. He stepped out of his vehicle and filmed us with a cell phone camera.
Now, unfortunately, you could see the telephone poles very distorted. With the cell phone videos, they're highly compressed. So there's a distortion there that we really can't make out the shape, make any kind of real determination, other than the fact that there seems to be rotation and it's generating a kaleidoscope of color. It's just a shame that it wasn't raw video.
Yeah, it's still really compelling though, looking at it for sure.
Absolutely. And that's stationary.
Okay.
And we saw that's very similar to what we saw many, many times. That
Yes.
exact color, the shadings, the throwing off of the light and the different shadings.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And-
that glinting appearance.
And these are definitely not drones.
No.
No, not it doesn't resemble any drone we've ever seen. I've worked in like the defense sector. I'm familiar with most of the technology out there. It's
And this police officer, I mean, these are trained eyes. I mean, I'm sure he's seen drones before and heard drones before, but it caught his attention. So simply because of the effect of the lighting on it.
Okay. Here's the next one.
Okay, so this is down at Rob Moses through the one of the cuts down to the beach. Now, what I did here is I magnified the view of this thing. It looks like a rotating polyhedron. Same as the police video. You multi.
This is actually, but this is of course USAR camera, so it's a sharper image, and you can see it's a polyhedral shape. It's rotating. You see those flat sides changing.
And there is multiple colors in there, not just blue. Blue is dominant. The blue violet.
And it's interesting is because it resembles what the pilots on the East Coast were seeing, the naval pilots,
Right.
like Ryan Graves, and they talked about these cube-like objects in a clear sphere. What it could be is if you have a polyhedral object that has multiple sides on it, it can appear round, and if you have some kind of field around it or distortion around it, it could look like it has a spherical enclosure around it. So I mean, it's pretty it resembles what they were talking about.
Now, I understand that all three of you have experienced, before we play the last clip here, one more clip. I understand that all three of you have experienced the hitchhiker effect, and you've had really pretty crazy stuff. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that from each of you.
Right. Okay. So I know Donna has, she has a very personal account with her in her house. We did in the hitchhiker effect that we have. I don't know if I had sent you the video. I hope I did. Where we have, I had gone out that night with the laboratory, the RV. We had returned back to my home at about 2:00 in the morning. I had set in for the night. Now the cameras on the RV were recording. There's 4 cameras on all 4 points on the RV, and almost like set up like various different quadrants. So I'm looking at the front, back, left, and right sides. These cameras are they're night vision cameras. They were recording all night long, and you'll notice that if you have the video, but there are street lights that have photo sensors on the top of the hoods of the streetlights. These photo sensors are very sensitive to the rising sunlight and all to shut these lights off during the daytime. What I noticed is in this recording is that all 4 streetlights shut down almost immediately, in a sequential fashion, but a fraction of a second apart. And it almost looks like that there was something above the streetlights that had tripped the sensors in order to shut the street lights down. And you could see on the back of the roll bar on the back of the RV, you could see the forming of a blue light, very bright blue light or violet light. And then it transitions to white light. And you could see this white light growing from the center out, almost as though this object was dropping in altitude. And you see the expanding light as something that might have been dropping. The other thing, it was causing an electromagnetic interference. Yes.
On all four cameras. Right?
Yes.
And more so on one particular camera.
Yeah. So all 4 cameras had a moire effect. And a moire effect. If I was used to be a video technician, so I understand as well as the scan rates and how that raster is produced on those monitors. The cameras themselves, when they were recording this, you could see that the moire pattern increased in frequency as this object was dropping. So I don't know whether a possible field was getting stronger or the interference frequency was getting stronger, but you can clearly see it in the moire pattern. The cameras are scanning at 32,000 cycles. These were multiples of that frequency. So in excess of 200 megahertz and increasing, almost to a gigahertz.
Okay. Got it.
That was for my story. if you'd
Yeah.
like, would you like to hear my story?
Yes, please.
I'll quickly- so I live on a hill. And so I've seen things over the years that have always made my mind wander. I've seen red orbital structures coming close and then disappearing. I've seen white, brilliant structures, one time in the distance on the North Shore. But I've never experienced what I experienced maybe 2 to 3, maybe it was 3.5 to 4 months into this field study project. I was home. I was tired. I went to bed. It was dark, but my bedroom faces the east. So I think there was some planet. It was either Venus in the sky, very early in the morning. All I know is I'm sleeping. I'm exhausted. And then I opened my eyes and I had no idea what time it was at that time. And even though my room was dimly lit from the planet, I think it was Venus, I just, something made me wake up. And when I opened my eyes and turned my head towards the wall of where my bedroom door is, I saw not a brilliant orbital structure, but it had low albedo, but it wasn't brilliant. But I saw it. It was unmistakable in shape. And I stared at it. And again, I was a little bit in shock, but this happened very, very quickly. And all I knew to do was to try to communicate as a human being to it. So I did. I just looked at it in awe. And I almost was silently pleading, please, don't go away. Let this be something meaningful that is taking place right here, on the back of a recent field study. And then I noticed that even though it was low albedo, it got even lower and it dimmed. I saw clearly it dimmed. And it was only, I was maybe about 2 to 4 feet away from it. My face was probably 4 feet away from it. And I would estimate it was small. It was on the small size, like maybe my visage, I would say 6 inches in diameter. So that's rather small. But as soon as I saw it dim, even dimmer than it was, I kind of felt desperate. And I said, well, I hope that this is the first of many other encounters. I hope you will come back again. And I talked to it as a human being, pleading, wanting to know what it was. And I felt that it was watching me. And I think that's what startled me awake. And then I ended up seeing it was, it was very early in the morning. And that was that hasn't happened since. But my mind during that time, I was pretty much filled with this project. We all were pretty much filled with this project. It was garnering so much of our time and our thoughts and our analysis and our interest level. So again, it harkens back to if we're open to it, do these things happen more and we notice them? Or do certain things appear only to certain people who are open to it?
Yeah, I think we might have, your Zoom might have frozen up. Now you're back. Okay.
There we go.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, yeah, who knows? Okay, let's watch the last clip here. And what are we looking at here?
Okay, so this is the a LiDAR measurement of an object that I believed it was roughly about 500 meters from where I was standing down the cut down to the beach, and I tried to measure it. I maneuvered myself. You'll see me going back and forth, maneuvering myself to get a clear line of sight for the LiDAR for the measurement. And I was able to hit the object twice. When I hit the object twice, and I could clearly see the beam through the night vision that I was making contact, it was coming back with a measurement of 45 feet.
Wow.
In distance away.
In distance, which was not bizarre.
It's kind of weird.
Amazing. All right. Well, this has been fantastic, folks. How can the folks at home support the work that you guys are doing financially, in whatever way they can help?
Donald, explain it.
Well, we were we were entertaining a few different offers for a few different publications, primarily scientific paper publication. But before, of course, the shorter paper was recently published in a engineering
academic journal.
journal. We ended up deciding to just published all the data, pretty much raw, expert instrumentation analysis by John and Gerry, how to, what was used, why, and then of course, databases of our experiences and what we analyzed the video and the pictures and the images over time to be. And we published it in a book, and it's available on Amazon. It's available probably other places as well. And this book contains a lot of information. It's over 100 pages, and there's a lot of pictures of the instrumentation. And we didn't receive funding. As I said, John put his finances on the line to get the Nightcrawler project up and running. At one point, we did receive some funding to pay for some very expensive replacement of cameras and also to add to the camera electro-optical inventory. But we're currently seeking additional funding, and we're looking at various aspects that we could go forward with that. So we're open to that. And then the other thing I want to say is we soon will be coming out with a website, and we will document some of our journey, which I think the public would love to see because it is very interesting. It's unique, it's a civilian approach that makes it more unique. And then the final thing I'd like to say is that, Matthew, you said it right at the start of this show. If everyone could keep an eye on the 2024 UAP Disclosure Act, where is that moving? What does your congressperson, what is their standing on that, their stance? And can you contact them, pick up the phone, email them, and let them know that you're supportive of that's very important for transparency and just for the knowledge that Congress certainly should have. And so should every person who elects Congress to be in the first place. That means every one of us can play a role. We all have an interest in this. We're all here because we're fascinated by this phenomena, whatever it chooses or will be proven to be in the end, if we can ever get to that point. So I'd say, funding, support by buying the book, support by watching videos and great shows like Matthew's, and contact your congresspeople, even your senators, and let them know that this is an issue of great import to you.
Awesome. Well, Gerry, John, Donna, really appreciate you coming on the show and looking forward to what you guys have in store next.
Thank you.
We appreciate you having us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, real privilege.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Good Trouble Show.